welcome back to our YouTube channel. I am Chet Nichols, IFBB Pro, NPC Judge, and this is my wife, Natalie, who is also an IFBB Pro and NPC Judge, and we've got a special treat for you today. We have the one and only Laurin Conlin of TeamLocalFit.com, correct?
Yeah.
I believe what it is. So you're really going to enjoy the topics we discussed today. Let me give you a little bit of background about Laura. We met her about 5 years ago when we went to Lane's VIP camp, and just a fascinating person, really explains things well. And she did a little bit of a study on some stuff that we're going to get to in a minute. But first, I'm going to turn it over to you, Laura. Kind of give us a little bit of background of your education and what got you into fitness, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Well, first, thank you guys so much for having me on. I truly appreciate the opportunity. So a little bit about me. I do have my bachelor's and master's in exercise science. So I went to Florida State as my undergrad. I helped out with some research there. Wanted to continue my education, so actually pursued the master's at USF with Dr. Bill Campbell. And when I went there, I said, I don't know what I want to do, but I know I want to do research. At the time in my undergrad, I had started competing. So I was an NPC figure competitor at one point for a few years, eventually made that transition into bikini. And then I also started my coaching business at that point too. Very small, but I did start. So a lot of things happening kind of in the undergrad, transitioning to graduate school. And then when I got to grad school, that is when I earned my IFBB Pro card at the end of 2014, which
I remember that.
eternity ago. And then I also, the business picked up a lot. And then I also started my research. So what we ended up doing the research on was looking at how different diets affect weight loss and weight regain. And this was something that I was interested in with my clients, of course, and then also myself, just because I was competing, and selfishly, I was interested in all these fluctuations. And while the goal of the study was not to replicate what I was doing currently, it would be to replicate what I would be able to help clients with in the future.
Right.
And honestly, I can say hands down that the research project that I did was one of the most impactful things I've ever done in my entire life. It was very long, it was very strenuous, but not even just for that, like the lessons that I learned, I still apply today, and that was 5 years ago. So it was definitely something that was really, really cool. And at this point, there was no research that looked directly at a meal plan versus macros, like head on, as far as like what happens when you do this, and not like we're going to recall what people did. Like this was an actual diet intervention. So essentially what we did was we took people who were resistance trained, but not by any means like physique athletes, just people who had to have at least a year of resistance training. So we weren't looking for any newbies. And we had to say, hey, you have to track your food and keep everything else the same in your life. Right. At this point, the lab is very different now that Dr. Campbell runs, which is amazing. We can talk about that too. But at this point, it was literally just like me. I had somebody helping me who was in their undergrad, and then him. So it wasn't really like we had a full lab staff that we could really do anything with. So that's why we did not do training. Now, if they were probably to replicate my study, they would 100% control training as well, because they do that for all the research. Now, at this point, we just didn't have that. So I said, hey, don't change your training and cardio. Take my word for it, please don't do it. And then, we had the diet intervention. So essentially what we did was we split the two groups into a macro plan. So, they had carbs, protein, fats to hit. And then they also were given educational resources on how to track macros. And then the other group had a meal plan. Hey, here's what to eat. Now there were choices. So it's not the typical bodybuilding meal plan.
I want to tap on something you just said, because you taught you taught people how to track. So or you had something?
Nope. No.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to delineate there. So they had a meal plan with options, but that's pretty obvious, right? But in research, you can't treat people differently.
Right.
So fortunately, the learning how to track was, here is an ebook on how to track macros. So they were they were given education, but they were not given education by me, or Dr. Campbell, or the assistant that helped me, because that would not really be fair. So again, in a perfect world now, Dr. Campbell's lab staff has literally people who are nutrition coaches who just help out with research. So in a perfect world, we would have the baseline period would not just be me collecting data. It would be actually us educating people on how to eat, portion sizes, macros, et cetera, right? And that's what they do now. But again, in my study, it was a completely different situation. So we said, hey, here's the best that we can do without being biased. And the whole reason for this study was, again, we see so many people who, and again, think about the time period. This was 2014, we were thinking about it. 2015, we executed it. This was really like the heyday, in my opinion, for flexible dieting, right? Like 2013 to 2015, everybody's like, I'm going to have protein shakes and Pop-Tarts and get lean. And, you know,
the Pop-Tart diet, the junk food diet. Yeah.
Thankfully, we've kind of come full circle, and I feel like people are getting away from that, which again, we will kind of discuss a little bit more, thankfully. But that was kind of that heyday of like, well, does it matter? You know what I mean? Like our meal plans. And at this point too, this was when meal plans were the worst things around, right? Like meal plans and bad coaches are getting exposed and all, like this is what's happening in kind of that like diet world, fitness world climate, which is why it was such an interesting question that I had. And then I really stumbled upon all of the like weight gain research. And it's a whole fascinating realm of research as far as like how different dieting behaviors affect you. And then I was also seeing it again, like with my own clients, with myself and other just competitors as well. There has to be something else that we can do, or, you know, what can we gather from this information?
Right.
And try and help after the diet.
Okay. So you basically, again, it was meal plans. They were given a set meal plans, and then you had your, if it fit your macros, you know, flexible dieting and things like that. And when you gave that presentation to us a while back, I guess I remembered it incorrectly when we were kind of having our discussion, because for some reason I was thinking that you found there wasn't a lot of difference, you know, during the study, but a follow-up, it seemed like people could adhere to flexible dieting a little better, but that's not necessarily true, is it? Or
so the diet was 10 weeks. So we had a 2-week baseline period. I'm gathering all the data. And then it's a 10-week diet, which was a 25% reduction in calories for most people.
Okay.
There was a few exceptions, but we don't need to get into that. And so it was decrease it away, super dry. It's not a competition, anything like that. But 25% is a decent amount for people to be dieting. And then afterwards, it was a 10-week follow-up. So I said, hey, do whatever you want, but please just come back. Come back at week 15 and come back at week 20. I'm trying to look at all the same variables. So we got to analyze data from both sets because I really wanted to look at not only the weight loss, but what happened afterwards. And did those diets affect that? Now, I'm under no delusion that a 10-week, what we would consider moderate diet is going to elicit the same changes as a harsh competition prep diet that somebody has been going off and on for 3 years. I mean, it's not even remotely similar, but it's the best that we can do. And getting people to do a 22-week study is hard enough, let alone like, hey, you want to do this for like 3 years?
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of issues there, you know, when you don't have the funding and you don't have, you know, there's just a lot of different things. So it was really the best that we could do in that kind of a situation and one of the longer dieting studies. So what we found was that really across all variables, there were no significant differences between any of the groups at any time point. The only difference was lean body mass increased in the flexible dieting group post-diet, whereas significantly.
That's what it was.
That's what it was.
I knew there was a little a difference in the follow-up.
Was one thing. And the issue, not the issue, but so looking back, okay, well, why did that happen? Right. So we analyzed afterward, because you can only do so many analyses afterwards without it looking like you're just trying to find something, because that's like a whole different scientific issue as well.
Cherry picking or something, trying to get the outcome you want.
Exactly. Yeah. So we were just kind of like, hey, was there anything that affected it? And when we looked at time spent exercising, there was no difference, because that was they reported that. No time differences there. And then when we looked at post-diet calories and protein, there was no differences there as well. So the only thing that we could loosely pull was that, well, there's two things. One is that it was just a random finding, because those do happen. And if we replicated the study, we might not see that again. So I don't like rest my head at night going, oh, they gained another pound of lean body mass, just so everybody knows. But it was something. And the other thing is too, maybe the stress effective. If the people were slightly more stressed with the dieting, with the meal plan of dieting, and then afterwards they had more flexibility. Now they felt a little better. Again, that's kind of a stretch, but it's really the only thing that we got when we've already looked at all the other variables. So in my mind, I chalk it up to things happen in science and we found a significant finding, but again, I'm not resting my head on it's the only thing. The biggest thing that I took away from it was some people thrived on the meal plan, like some people thrived on the macros, and vice versa. So that was really the biggest thing that I learned about coaching, was from that.
So kind of basically what works best for the individual, because
at that time point,
at that time point, because we worked with some people who really just kind of they've been with meal plans for so long, it becomes a crutch for them. And then they start kind of going off the radar or try flexible dieting, and it's either ingrained in their head, this isn't working, or they just can't wrap around the concept of, ooh, I can have a little bit of a treat here and I don't have to stick to just the tilapia and things like that. So, I mean, is that kind of what you're finding in your coaching business as well?
Yes. So this is actually, so funny is that, when I did this research, and again, think of like the time frame.
Yes.
It was very much like, well, flexible dieting has to be the best thing since sliced bread, right? Like flexible dieting is what it is, and everybody should be doing this. And everybody who isn't is doing themselves a disservice. And then what I really learned was like, wow, I really need to kind of take a step back here and say, this might not be the best thing for everybody. Like a meal plan might be exactly what somebody needs, not forever, but they might need that as a tool at some point. And then the second kind of thing that I learned from it, several years later, now being more entrenched in coaching and dealing with people every single day, what I thought was flexible dieting is not. Flexible dieting. So remember I said there was a lot of like this literature that I was looking at before the study. So there's two things. There was one that was just like weight regain in general. And then there was also like different types of dieting behaviors. And there's one researcher who's like very big on this. His name's Westenhofer. And he basically looked at, there's the restraint model of dieting, right? There's either flexible restraint or rigid restraint. And in my mind, that said, flexible restraint must be flexible dieting. Rigid restraint must be meal plans. It's all the things that we think about. Black and white thinking, more likely to binge, et cetera, like all these things with the rigid type of dieting. Oh, flexible dieting, that must be it. But flexible dieting with, as far as IFYM, can teeter very, very kind of in the middle between rigid and flexible dieting, like as a restraint model. So what I started to realize was I thought I was doing all my clients a service to say, oh, just track your macros year round. You can fit whatever you want in your diet. And then I quickly realized, maybe not quickly enough, but a few years later, this isn't working. This is not the saving grace for everybody. This is not the end all be all. And this is not where people should end their diet journey. It shouldn't go, oh, let's look at portions, let's get on a meal plan, and then track macros for the rest of your life. Because there has to be life after macros. And if I'm telling a client, hey, you've worked up to arbitrary numbers, 250 grams of carbs, 60 grams of fat, go have a meal with your husband this weekend, and it's like the last fucking supper, and they lose their mind. I'm doing a terrible job as a coach. That is not flexible. That is not a flexible diet. That is a rigid diet through and through, and you might as well be on a meal plan if you can't eat out just because you track macros. And I started to see this, and it became its own neuroses that a lot of my clients are falling into, because of course the types of people that are attracted to what we do are these types of individuals who kind of fall into this mindset. And I realized that they were just trading meal plans for macros, and that's the same exact thing. So over the past year, I have really, really done a lot of work with how I try and coach people, like the words I try and use, and just implementing more actual diet flexibility with my clients. And it's been a complete game changer. Now, it's not been easy, but it has been a game changer, and I feel like a much better person and a much better coach to them.
Yeah. And one of the things you mentioned, even with, or kind of alluded to a little bit there, is when you're doing your, let's say contest prep. Okay. Somebody's really sticking to, doing a real good job with their, kind of their macros and stuff like that. But sometimes they're making a point where a meal plan is helpful to them. Like maybe the last 3 or 4 weeks of prep. So we know the foods they're going to eat, let's just lay it out so they don't even have to think about it. It kind of takes that stress away. You find that as well? For sure. There's so many,
and competition prep is very nuanced as well, right? Like you can't, like I'm sitting here preaching diet flexibility. Well, you want to get a 6-pack and striated glutes, there's gonna be little flexibility. You know what I mean? Like now there still is flexibility in the fact of like what we kind of talked about before air, tuna or chicken, that's still flexibility, but it's not like, just go have a few untracked meals this week, see how you feel. That's a different conversation. A competition prep diet is very, very different than an off-season situation, right? So yes, I do find that typically self-created or guided with me and or my coaches kind of meal plans are really helpful at the end of diet. I mean, I do that myself just because it's like, I don't want to think about this. And then you can also kind of track the responses. So that is a real thing. Like if you know, hey, I'm eating all this weird stuff, well, you don't know how you're going to peak, how you're going to perform. And a lot of these things are things that I think a lot of us intuitively do, but when a lot of other people don't, right? So like I would intuitively do that. Like I kind of eat the same stuff, kind of eat whole foods, kind of just stick to that. And then I realized when I started asking for diet recalls from clients that not everybody does that. And it was like, oh, wait, this is not good. You know what I mean? So you might need a little bit more help here. Whereas other people are good to go. Like that's pretty much what they do. They don't really need help in that area. So other people need a lot more help with choices as far as like, hey, what's the best thing to fuel with? Or even on like a refeed day, I'll be like, hey, I want to see how XYZ foods do, you know, eat this amount, take this, you know, send me pictures 2 days later, like all these kinds of things. And that's such a different thing as far as contest prep goes than like just general pop dieting.
Two different animals, so to speak.
Oh, completely different.
You were talking about a little bit of variety, or kind of alluding to that as well. One of the articles you have on your website, which, by the way, I know that's everybody in your team and stuff like that. I encourage a lot of people to go to her website because on the articles and stuff there, she really breaks things down nicely so everybody can understand it. Really hits that general population who may not understand how to read scientific studies and stuff like that, which there are some things in there, but you know, the way you simplify it, anybody can go there and read it and come away with some actual knowledge, just not regurgitating information they don't really understand. I love that anyway. But I want to bring that up because the food variety choice is one that was up there, and kind of allude to, you know, meal planning. You can kind of do this with the flexible diet as well. We have a lot of our competitors who do like meal plans. Okay, we say for the week, I want you to go ahead and find the foods that fit your macros, make your meal plan out of that, but keep a little bit of variety. And then the next week, do the same thing, but something a little bit different, which is exactly what you were alluding to in that article. And I absolutely love that. And I mean, that's great for the general population, but it's also great for athletes too.
Oh yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Like that is our goal with the articles, is to write them in a way that like is very straightforward. You know, there's so other people try and complicate things, or that you feel like you're really dumb because they like bring it so down low. It's like, okay, I don't want to do that, but I do want to make it clear and concise for people. So I really appreciate it. And there's definitely a fine line. So me and the whole team, we just trade off writing articles. So there's a ton on our website under the articles tab. But back to the food variety, it's a very interesting thing. So you can use it to your advantage and your disadvantage. So there is an interesting line of research that actually shows that the more food variety that you have, the less satiated you are and the more likely you are to overeat. So if somebody's in a situation where they're not controlling their food, or they're not, let's say, in a contest prep, they're more likely to overeat if they have all these choices and they have so much variety. Likewise, if you are prepping, and even if you are on a set number of calories you need to eat, you still might be making it harder on yourself, right? But to that same token, if you have no food variety, then you're going to develop all these gut issues. So there's a bunch of different things. And then also just, of course, like get burned out. So it's very, very like interesting, like that fine line of like what you should do. But I think a really practical recommendation for people is, hey, you know, for the week, kind of set the same stuff. Like, you know what you're going to eat. You can look forward to it. You have it. It really takes out the guesswork. And then next week, make some changes to it. But then again, keep it kind of same within that week. And it's really, I mean, most people grocery shop once or twice a week. So that kind of works out. And most people can kind of stick to something for about a week. And there's some meals that like literally I eat a lot of the same things over and over again with small variations just because I like them. But you do have to make those changes. Otherwise your gut will not like you when you introduce foods back. And that is something that unfortunately happens to a lot of people when they go on these ultra restrictive diets, and then they have like 6 foods for like, 5 months. And then they're like, oh, I have an allergy. You're like, no, your gut bacteria just died off and you don't have the enzymes to produce.
Food sensitivities can change if you go without them for a long time as well.
Yeah, and that happens. Think of a contest prep situation. If somebody cuts something out, you basically, like in a very, very simplistic way, your gut has bacteria, and those bacteria produce enzymes which digest certain foods. If those bacteria die off because you're not eating it, you no longer have the enzymes to digest the certain foods. So when you add that in, your body goes, what the hell is this? And it's going to be a lot harder. Whereas people who keep in variety, like, I can kind of eat most stuff. And why is that? Because I eat a wide variety of foods, and I don't say, oh, I can never have whatever.
Yeah, she had an issue with that in her prep too. What was it that you?
Cauliflower-based crusts and that sort of thing. Yeah, suddenly huge bloat, uncomfortable, but I'd been having them the whole time. Just suddenly my body didn't want it anymore, and I'm gonna force the issue right there before stage.
Nope.
Not important.
No.
Cruciferous vegetables can be a real finicky one. I find that a lot of people have issues with those. And sometimes it's an overconsumption too, because I mean, think about it. Like when you're dieting, those kinds of things are very voluminous and very low calorie. So a lot of people go from like not having it to like slamming those kinds of
Every
food.
meal.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, I'll have cauliflower for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, everything. And then your body's like, no, we can only digest this so quickly. And what people don't realize too is that when you are dieting, you develop a little bit more of these food issues, not also from cutting them out, but simply because your metabolism is slowed down. Everything is a lot slower.
Yeah.
Why would things be operating as quickly if you're eating 1,200 calories for the past 4 weeks? It's just not. So things have time to kind of ferment and build up. So you're going to have a lot more of those issues, kind of what I see with, I'm sure you guys see that too with clients.
Yeah, that's a good point that we need to discuss with our clients too, that sometimes you forget about. And you mentioned it right. When you get that low of calories and you find that one food that you do like, we do have a kind of tendency to do a little too much of that particular one. So that's a really good point. So people are wondering, why am I bloated all the time, and why am I sluggish or so? Well, that's probably an issue right there. You need to go back and look at, okay, so are you eating more something than anything else? And we kind of go back from that.
Or people slam the weird diet foods, which I try and have people not do because it generally doesn't work out too well. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, have a diet soda here or a Powerade Zero or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Or, have a piece of gum or two. But when I have people, I had 10 Jellos, a pack of gum, 18 soda, you're like, okay.
I filled my entire macros with sugar.
No wonder you're bloated. You know what I mean? Like, if you weren't bloated, I would be like, holy shit, that's impressive. So it's, and again, I get it because you're starving. Want me to have gum? I'll just chew all this gum. And, it becomes like this obsessive thing or, the diet drinks and stuff like that. And again, I'm not saying don't have them, but you have to realize like those things still affect your body and you can only have that within moderation. And part of that just becomes a psychological thing.
That's the key right there. Moderation. Don't overdo it because they can have a little diet, so a little bit of gum. Heck, my go-to treat has always been Little Debbie powdered sugar donuts. I mean, really. And this kind of goes back a little bit where you said that you take something away from you for a long period of time, you get a little taste of it, then boom, you can go nuts. Even down in prep, I still had them, maybe just 1 or 2 a day, but I didn't feel like I needed to go binge on them because I knew I'd have a couple more the next day.
Yeah.
So, those are some really good points that you brought up that a lot of people need to understand. It's all about moderation. It really is. And we get those poverty levels, that we have to pay attention to that and don't overdo the things we like. Just kind of keep it simple, a little bit of here and there. And if you have some issues, like you said, like the gut issues or whatever, then you kind of have to take one of those things out at a time sometimes to figure out what it is, right? Otherwise, you take 2 or 3 items out, you don't know which one affected you.
Mm-hmm.
So really
I'm really big on food journaling for clients.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, if somebody starts having issues, of course, we're going to look at the low hanging fruit. Okay. How many hours of sleep? Like, what was your sleep like this week? Mm-hmm. How much water did you have? Because people don't realize that like water fluctuations are one of the biggest causes of being backed up and not being regular.
Say that one more time. We have this conversation with our clients all the time.
Seriously.
So one more time.
One more time. If you have low water intake or water fluctuations, like you have a good amount one day and then it drops the next and it kind of fluctuates, you are really going to run into issues with digestion and just regularity. Being properly hydrated is one of the most important things for bowel movements and just regularity in general. So that's why I have people track their sleep. I have them track their water. And then of course, I'm asking the very open-ended, how was your week? How do you feel mentally this week? And that can open up Pandora's box, which is why I asked. But it's important because if people are telling me, oh, I have these sudden sporadic gut issues. Well, did you sleep this week? Are you on your period? Did you drink any water? Did you get fired? Did you break up with your boyfriend? There's so many things, right? But then after we've kind of looked at all those things, it's like, okay, let's do a food journal. And then you can kind of start to see things pop up pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. Hey, every time I have that cauliflower pizza, my stomach's in knots. Or this morning, I had one of my coaches text me. She's actually prepping, and she was like, after every time I eat meal 3, I feel this way, and I don't know what's going on. She told me what it was, and I was like, that can be it was deli turkey. I was like, though that can be real finicky for people because there's tons of ingredients, and we don't really know what's in that. So let's just pull that and see how you feel. So sometimes it's literally comes down to like, what did you eat when, and just journal that and start seeing. I have a friend, she's a great resource in this area, Dr. Gabrielle Fundero. I don't know if you guys know her, but incredibly intelligent, and one of like the only people that I trust with gut stuff, which is the whole, Wild West, of course. But she works for Renaissance Periodization. She's highly educated. Anyways, So, oh geez, where did that go? That just went, oh, food sensitivity test. I was like, oh, here we go. And it's fun. If anybody can see, if anyone's watching, like my brain yeah. So the food sensitivity tests are really not validated. So most of them, and they're obviously, if you have like a allergy or something like that, or, you're allergic to peanuts, like that's established. But if I have a sensitivity to eggs or something like that, a lot of the food sensitivity tests actually just show up like what you've been eating regularly. So if you ever see, I've seen people post this all the time, it's almost comical. They'll be like, oh, I got my food sensitivity test done, and it had this on it, and they're like, I just had that, the other day, and I felt fine, but I guess I'm sensitive to it. It's like, nope, that's why it showed up. You know what I mean? And so yes, I actually have an interview with her on my YouTube channel. Not just trying to plug that, but it actually was a good interview.
Go ahead. What day? Actually, while we're there, we'll get back. What day is that, or should I say?
No, it's already on there.
Oh, it is? Okay, so give people the address how to find that real quick.
Just search Laurin Conlin, LaurinConlin. That's my YouTube, and it's like an hour-long interview with her, all about gut stuff. So
we'll plug that at the bottom here too, in the YouTube thing as well, of course.
Thank you. Yeah, she has lots of great information. Just other interviews that she's done as well. But yeah, so basically, if you're really looking to see like what is an issue, start journaling it, start seeing it. And per Gabrielle's recommendations, really the only, at this point, scientifically validated, I wouldn't say system of eating, but I guess type of eating or elimination diet or anything of that sort that actually seems to have a lot of validity is FODMAPs. So a lot of people will have it. She said about 75% of people that she sees, the issues that they have are FODMAP issues. And then the other 25%, of course, might be a little bit more advanced, but most people, if you kind of look at lifestyle factors and you work on all this, and then you look at this, the FODMAPs, it could be that. So it's not to say that everybody has a FODMAP issue, but I just really want people not like run to get a food system first. Okay, look at these things: digestion, sleep, hormones, stress, all this kind of stuff, and then start food journaling, and then maybe say, oh, hey, these foods are popping up, and then you can kind of plug and play from there.
Okay.
That was a weird tangent. Sorry, I don't know how that.
No, great. I love going on that stuff because, a lot of times we don't know what's going to come up in a topic. And, we don't want to get too off in the weeds, but if there's something that's really important there, we can discuss that real quick and move on. And no, actually think that's great. So we're obviously not scripted here at all. And I love that. So anyway, so we'll kind of wrap this portion up here. If you had 2 or 3 key points for somebody to take home, what would you say those are?
In relation to what we've already talked about, or just in general?
To what we talked about right here.
Okay. So understanding, first and foremost, having a baseline food education will really be the driver for your diet success. So if you don't understand what is in food, you are not going to be able to be successful for the rest of your life. And everybody thinks that first thing is, just teach them how to track macros. That's terrible advice. If you want to teach people what's in food, first they need to understand portion sizes. They need to understand just like reading a label, like what's in there. So I typically like to talk about it on a continuum of like portion sizes first. From there, go to maybe a meal plan or a self-written meal plan or just meal suggestions, right? Just depending on kind of the scope and who you're working with. And then maybe transition to tracking macros. But before you even get there, you have to kind of understand what's in food. So that's point number 1, laying that foundation of food education, which kind of leads to point number 2, which is meeting clients where they're at. It's very, very just poor as a coach to think that here's the best way. Well, if somebody's all the way at the starting at the bottom down here, that's not the best way. Okay. Optimal is for people who want optimal. But if somebody is at the very bottom or they're just starting or they failed 1,800 times on certain diets, it's really unfair to ask them to do that. So there's a lot of people that I just talk with, even just helping out. Right. And hey, what are you doing? Right. Just tell me what you're eating. Whoa, we have 100 things we could work on before I even talk to you about how much you should be eating. Right. Like basic stuff. Drink water, add in fruits and vegetables. You need to have protein 4 times a day. Literally, if people just had protein 4 times a day, they would be in such a better place with their diet. It's just insane. And we forget that people don't eat like that. Like I'm like, the protein 4 to 5 times a day. I'm making food all the time, like have shakes, like no issue to us. But that is like a huge thing for most people. So if you can drink some water and, get in a few vegetables and have protein 4 times a day, you're doing like 80% of the work, honestly. So meeting clients where they're at really is the second point that I took away not only from my study, but of course, coaching more over the years. And then lastly, understanding that diet flexibility is really the key to sustainable results. And this is not sustainable like, oh, love yourself where you're at. No, I'm talking about actual results, right? If you want to make progress in the long term, you're still going to have to work. Flexibility does not mean you're not working hard, but it actually means understanding, okay, you now understand where your food is at, right? You're meeting the client where they're at. And then, okay, now they've kind of graduated and you have to say, hey, like life is going to come up, right? Like you're going to have social events, you're going to have family things, you're going to have vacations. And if every time one of those things come up and you completely disregard your diet, you're going to be spinning your wheels for the rest of your life. So coaching.
If you remove yourself from those events and you don't go to them,
you're not living.
You can't do that forever.
Yeah. Then you're losing your life. You know what I mean? Like it's very, very sad. And we see that with the competitors a lot. And then we see the other thing with more Gen Pop or kind of intermediate people. So those are my three big takeaways from the things that we've been talking about. And, you have to understand without food education, you'll never be able to actually be successful. But to that point, you also have to understand food flexibility, and that takes a long time. And when I talk about these things, people are like, oh, okay, I'll do that tomorrow. No. This is going to take many months.
There is a learning curve. It's like you said, you can't just basically take them all the way up here. You're just taking them out of the frying pan and throw them in the fire.
Yep.
Step through it. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm very passionate about that now, seeing the negatives that we've all seen as coaches over the years.